Hey, everybody, this is Kenny. Welcome back to the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. Okay, let me ask this question. How much has employee engagement changed in the last 32 years? Well, the answer is it hasn't. The numbers will shock you. And I have got an executive employee leadership expert, Stephen Turner, joins me today on the podcast to talk about, is it too late to reverse this whole great resignation? What do we do as we are on the brink of this major change of how we actually do business? How do we get folks engaged again? You don't want to miss a second of this. Let's get at it. Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. And I have got a phenomenal guest with us today that is going to help you navigate all those things. But I guarantee you, after these 25 to 30 minutes or so of listening to him, you're going to be thinking about your business in a much different way and your leadership in a much different way. So I want to introduce executive employee leadership expert Steve Turner to the podcast. Steve, it is so great to have you on. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here. I love having conversations about that which is near and dear to my heart.
Yes.
I've spent my whole life in this arena, and we'll do the same thing again.
Yeah, and that is fantastic. And I can't wait because you are really talking about some things from a different point of view. And I think you're sounding the alarm a little bit for some leaders. So I want to jump right into it. And I'm just going to take something that I saw on your site. And from one of your talks, you say that we are on the brink of a major change, a major shift in both leadership and business. Let's start to talk about it. What did you mean?
Well, one thing about the pandemic season. It revealed some major, let's say, I'm going to call it an underpinning weakness that has been supporting, if you want to call it that, management approaches for decades. The pandemic comes along, people are working from home, they are enjoying being there. Now, a couple of years later, organizations start to call people back to the office, so to speak, and people don't want to go back to the office. And one of the reasons for that is they don't like being there. So when you consider that an employee doesn't like being at the office and they've just spent a number of years, perhaps decades, in an environment that they didn't enjoy being in, can you just imagine the impact that had on their work performance
Yes.
and the impact it had on businesses? And the one of the challenges is that we've been in this particular management mode for over a century probably,
Wow.
and it goes way back to I don't know how far back you want me to go, but it goes all the way back to the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
And nobody alive today was there when it started.
Right.
So what we're living with is the result of generation after generation of leadership group being raised in the same environment, which in fact was flawed.
Hmm.
And let me just explain why I think this initially happened so that we could see where I'm not going to say it was intentional, it wasn't, but it was a result of the course. So let's go back to people used to live in an agrarian society.
Hmm.
People were farmers.
Hmm.
Those farmers ran their lives. So a farmer may have a crop cycle or a livestock cycle, one or two a year. So maybe at the beginning of the cycle, they go to the bank and they borrow some money to buy seed or maybe to buy some livestock. The livestock grows, the seed is planted, the crop comes. Either of those cycles pays out. So the farmer's got his money, runs back to the bank, pays off the loan, and lives the rest of the year on that money. So the farmer is 100% in control of his life,
Hmm.
and he has to manage the money. If he has to live on it for 7 months, then he obviously doles it out over the 7 month period.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when we fast forward and we take a look at what happened when the Industrial Revolution started, and there's nothing wrong with progress, right? Nothing at all.
Mm-hmm.
But something happened here where the farmers who used to run their lives move into the factories and somebody else is telling them what to do. And then instead of getting paid once or twice a year, they're getting paid maybe once or twice a month, maybe once a week.
Mm-hmm.
So now there is a natural tendency not to have to manage money as well because they're getting paid every week,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, okay, so this rolls out. Um, we know it becomes uncomfortable because in the 1860s, labor unions started to crop up
Mm-hmm.
for the same reason I'm just illustrating, really, and that is people want to have some say in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go way back to the beginning, where man was created, he was given a desire to rule his life.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
a whole other conversation. But I
Yes.
can just say
Yes.
that that desire is always there.
Yes.
So when we take a look at, I think a good way to look at that is to look at ourselves. Do we want to have some say over the person that's staring at us in the mirror? I would say yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then you get into all sorts of living conditions and what have you. But at the end of the day, when the Industrial Revolution started to pick up in 1895, there was an intentional focus. It had kind of always been there, but there was a specific focus to now wanting to run businesses based on statistics
Mm-hmm.
and using that as the key monitor. Now, when you consider that any business owner, whether they're a solopreneur or a CEO of a corporation with hundreds of thousands of people, they're both going to watch numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing wrong with that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because everybody's in business for success, to accomplish something. Well, unfortunately, when businesses get larger and larger, and I can talk about this from the beginning of it, but when you look at an organization gets larger and larger, there becomes a wider gap that exists between the person requesting the numbers, the owner, the CEO, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and the people on the street that are walking out the request, which
Mm-hmm.
many times comes up down as a command.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this desire for numbers trickles all the way through the organization. It comes down to the poor frontline supervisor who has to take that message and give it to the people on the street that actually generate the results. And they have no clue how to do it because nobody ever taught it.
Mm-hmm.
And the cycle just keeps on going.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you want to ask me a question, jump in because I could talk about this for half an hour.
No, you're going you're in a great place, and I love everything that you said and painting that picture for us because when you go back and even you look now, so what what can leaders do? Like, how do we start to now break this cycle that you're talking about? And I know you talk a lot about the Great Resignation as well. Um, how do we now take all of these lessons from the past and how do we start to break some of these cycles that would just end because you're right. It is amazing how many people did not want to go back to the office. I'll
Right.
just say this real quick. My daughter thought she wanted to go back. And when she went back the first time, she's like, because she missed me. She lives by herself. She missed being around people. And then when she went back, she's like, huh, what was the big deal? You know what I mean? She had to fight traffic and everything like that. So you're dead on what you're saying. But now, I'm curious now, what's what are some steps now to take?
Before I answer that question, let me just go back and complete kind of the storyline here.
Yes. Yes, please.
So when people were home, right? So now they've got their 8 hour job that instead of doing it from 9 to 5, they're doing it from 7 to 7, right? They're spreading the 8 hours over a 12 hour span because they're
Yes.
doing, family things, and it got comfortable.
Yes.
It's nice. I've been there,
Yes.
and um, it's just that when they were called back to the office, they didn't want to go back. Number one, they didn't want to lose the flexibility, but number two, they didn't want to go back to the environment
Mhm.
either.
Mhm.
Now, what does the environment show? And this is really a single statistic that tells a big story. Since 1990, Gallup has produced a number. It says 85% of people, employees at all levels, not management, non-management alike, 85% of them are not fully engaged in their work.
Mm. Wow.
Now, okay, that's a number, all right? Fine, let's do something with it.
Yeah.
But you know that number hasn't changed in 32 years.
Oh my gosh.
And here is where the issue, the solution comes from this. So the number doesn't change because let's say the number's reported. This happens every year. And then the next 2 or 3 months after that, people like me stand up and say, this is the solution to that problem. It gets people excited for 2 to 3 months. Then they fall back into status quo and the thing starts over again 9 months later.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the the reason that doesn't move is because I can stand up and say whatever I want to say. But if I use you as an example, just because we're having this conversation, and I came to you, Kenny, and I said, you need to change your approach here. But number one, do you know, and I'm using you as an example, do you know the condition of your employees' opinions of the management team in your business?
Wow. Yeah.
They're likely going to say no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now consider this. If I came to you and said that if you do this, this, and this, you can improve this situation, you as a wise business owner are not going to take a step unless you know where you're starting from,
Mm-hmm.
right? You don't want to take the old throw spaghetti at the wall deal and see what sticks.
Mm.
You need to know where you are so that you can determine how to get, and we would do this for you or any other coach that comes in, would help you define where you are. Then the next step you need is you need a strategic plan with a roadmap that gets you from where you are to where you're going. And unfortunately, those first two things are hardly ever discussed
Mm.
because people throw out solutions with no strategy to get from one to the other.
Mm.
So those that know where they are and those that are involved in putting together a strategy to get you from one place to the other, you'll have a really good chance of getting where you're going. And then when you're working in a corporation scenario, um, is I was raised in UPS,
Mm-hmm.
and UPS had a really great philosophy. I don't know if it's written down anywhere. I never saw it, but this is basically what it is. If you did well, you're left alone. I was left alone for 34 years on the management team.
Wow.
So because I was successful and
Yeah.
other people were successful as well, right? Well, you can walk that journey and I can do anything I want to do there because I am accountable and only controlling my piece of the slice, my slice of the pie,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whether it's 4 people or 400 people,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm fully in charge of what's going on. But now put on the CEO hat. So now someone like me comes in and helps work through the stuff I was telling you. And then all of a sudden, the CEO should say this: if we make this change, how do I know it's going to last?
Mm.
So then there needs to be some structure in place because corporations need structure for accountability.
Mm-hmm.
So the CEO can go look at something to find out, well, that's happening the way it's supposed to happen. So I'm confident that we're on the right path. I didn't need that as a working at UPS because I was in charge of what I did.
Mm-hmm.
But from the CEO's perspective, he needs that piece of the puzzle out there so that he or she is comfortable that what they're investing in the solution is a long-term solution.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Now
Yeah.
think of this. Think of this. The whole purpose of the solution is to cause that 85% number of being not fully engaged. I describe it, I flip it over, and I say, what if 85% were engaged?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
What would that mean? I can tell you from experience what it means. It means smiles on people's faces. It means people working together to accomplish the goal that I set, right? They were my numbers,
Mm-hmm.
but, and it's the CEO's numbers, or the business owner's numbers. But when we treat people correctly and we inspire them, I call it leading people instead of managing them,
Mm-hmm.
they will do amazing things because we internally want to do good work.
No doubt. No doubt. I love it. I love it. And that just the last thing you said, I've always told people that no one, gets dressed in the morning, takes a shower. I'm here in New York. They navigate through New York traffic to get somewhere and say, hey, I just want to do a lousy job today. Everyone wants to
Exactly.
do a really good job. And so are leaders even aware of what you're talking about, Steve? Especially this 85% number, which is stunning to me, and it's even more stunning, I'm sure it is to you, that that number hasn't changed in 32 years. I mean,
Yeah.
and so, and we see it, right, as consumers. We can go in McDonald's and you could tell, hey, wow, everybody's engaged here, right? They're all focused on the people walking
Yep.
in, and you go to
Yep.
one right down the road, and it's like, uh-oh, what is this? So I guess my two-part question is, are leaders even aware? And now, what is it that once they at least have that awareness, as you spoke about, what do you do?
Let's talk about the awareness thing first.
Yes.
I don't believe, my honest, what I'm based on what I observed, I don't believe leaders know the situation is what it is
Okay.
until the pandemic hit, and now people are resigning from their work. 45 million people have resigned from their jobs in the
Crazy.
last 18 months.
Amazing. That's crazy.
So so now once I as a CEO find out that, oh my gosh, I'm losing my people, what happens? They panic, like, how am I going to meet my results if I don't have all the people I need?
Yeah.
Now let's take that to the next point. How am I going to grow the business in this scenario?
Mm-hmm.
So the real solution that's appealing or should be appealing to CEOs is that there is a very good way to encourage people to want to work for you. And I can say that from experience as well,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what I lived.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't pie in the sky stuff that I'm saying. This is real and very applicable.
Mm-hmm.
So the solution long term is to shift management philosophy so that instead of, as I said before, managing people by numbers, we are instead leading them through inspiration.
Mm. There you go.
And
Love it.
it's a whole lot more fun, I can
Yes.
tell you.
Yes.
Now,
Absolutely.
um, right now, as far as somebody fixing the situation today, you got two things. Number one, there's optics, and number two, there is uh, the actual change. And I think that you have to deal with the optics as much as the physical change
Mm.
for this reason. If employees see that something new is happening and they hear the story, they hear what's going to happen, there's going to be a degree of, I don't believe you.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay, because it doesn't take long to prove the point. I firmly believe that if you treat employees correctly, within 90 days, they'll shift because they want to be
Agree.
treated that way,
Agree.
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, there's, so anyway, getting back to your question. So there needs to be a concerted effort to change what the status quo is and create a new environment, a new atmosphere. Again, leading people, inspiring people to want to be there. I'll give you another statistic that makes this very believable. And again, I got to look at myself because this is where it came from. My piece of the puzzle. We're working with a couple other people as well that have observed the same thing coming from slightly different angles.
Mm-hmm.
But it all comes together to the same solution, right? And that is that when people feel that somebody cares for them, they will take care of you.
Mm.
So if I take care of my people,
Mm-hmm.
they'll take care of me.
Mm-hmm.
I've witnessed it for decades
Mm.
in corporate America
Mm-hmm.
and in the small business we have today.
No question.
Nope, not even debatable.
Yeah.
Not
No,
at all.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to throw a couple more things out here.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you were talking about leading from the middle.
Yes.
Maybe I shouldn't be prompting your questions, but I was really inspired when I heard of what your focus is,
Yes.
because nobody has to believe or think that they have to wait for somebody from above to cause you to change your approach.
Yes. Yes.
Because here's what's going to happen. If somebody changes their approach, their personal approach, right? And you're one person of 100,000 people on the management team, you're going to have an impact on the people you touch,
There you go.
and they're going to like it.
Yeah.
You can almost become the example.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And when things start to shift, people it attracts attention.
Yeah.
There's no question.
Yeah.
Granted, an individual or a few people that want to try to do something different for themselves and how they run their people, they're not going to put into place the corporate structures they need for long-term accountability.
Mm-hmm.
No need at that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But when you get to the point where you've got multiple layers of management involved in this, then you need that structure, and that just works best that way.
Yeah, yeah. And you're dead on in where I like to go, right? With with middle managers, why wait? What are you waiting for? You waiting for a
Right.
CEO to come down and tell you, that your folks are disengaged? And that's where I think what you're doing is so important because if I recognize it at my store level, right? I'm running a retail store. I've got 20 people that work in there, and I've got to be able to take that step back and say, man, they are just not engaged,
Yeah.
and maybe it's the opposite, right? That maybe I'm figuring that out by looking at the numbers, or maybe it's just by my customers telling me whatever it is. But I just think that if it's not recognized at that level, will it ever change? Of course, there are some CEOs that have a lot of impact that can change it. Um, you've mentioned inspire a couple of times here. What are just some practical things that employees, frontline employees, really inspires them today? What can just that frontline leader? What are a couple of things that they can do to really inspire and get their people back engaged?
There are 5 basic needs for employees. And if every management person, I should call them, I don't like the word manage, to be honest with you, but
Yes,
it's a word, it's a recognized word, right?
yes,
But if every leader would take care of these 5 things, everything would be great. I don't want to make it sound so simple, but let's face it. Number one, when a person walks in the door, when you hire somebody on day one, first thing they're going to want to know, apart from the fact that they're getting paid for being there, is where do I fit in the puzzle?
mm,
Where do I fit in the team? And as soon as they know where they fit in their team, they automatically feel a part of the business and they haven't even done anything yet, right? Okay, the next
love it,
step
love it.
is people want to be well trained. So if managers would make sure that they made sure their people were well trained, and I can talk about that as well, because there is a way to do that.
Yes,
Well trained, you then give the employee 2 things. Number one, I can do it today. And number three, I want to do more tomorrow.
yes,
Because by being well trained and successful in their current work, they know in themselves that they have the capability to do more.
to do more. Wow, wow,
Just
absolutely.
generally
Yeah, yeah.
speaking, I know I can do more here, right? So the next thing is they want to be appreciated.
Mhm.
If an employee does well, which if people would just follow this approach, they will acknowledge them and appreciate them for who they are,
Mhm,
right? The fourth one is they want to be paid fairly.
mhm,
Now, pay is number 4 on the list.
mm,
And I put it on as number 4 because money is a short-term motivator.
mhm, mhm.
So any organization, any business, any leader that believes that money is going to appease everybody all the time, they'll catch them, it'll be a spark. But what happens when people get more money? They tend to adjust their lifestyle
Spend more.
to absorb the increase,
Yeah,
and they're right back where they were before.
yes, Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And number five, they want to have opportunities.
Yeah.
And if we train people in that regard so that employees have that full scope feel, right? Part of a team, well trained, capable to do more, um, paid properly, and appreciated, sky's the limit because there's all little pieces of puzzle that go along to support those other things.
Yeah.
But I want to give you an example of something. If anybody doesn't believe this is true, um, I spent 5 years during UPS's initial international expansion.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of the fortunate ones over there where um, I was a finance director over there. And we had finance directors in the 5 big countries over there: UK, Spain, Italy, France, and whatever one I missed, Germany. I had everybody else. So the value, the benefit was I worked in 10 different countries, 10 somewhat varying cultures, all the way from the Nordics, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, through Austria, the Netherlands, Greece and Turkey, and Ireland over here.
Wow.
But an interesting thing, I have to say, I didn't realize it while I was over there, but I did in retrospect.
Mm-hmm.
Cultures change, but hearts don't. The process works everywhere.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter if I'm in Denmark or I'm in Istanbul. If you do the 5 things I just mentioned, they will follow you
Yeah.
every time.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so fortunate, and I have to say this is kind of one of those behind the scenes deals. I was in the office in Istanbul, and I won't tell you exactly what the person said, but the one of the people there in the accounting department came and told me something about how business is run in Turkey. So it just gave me one more slice. But if I didn't have a relationship with this person, would they come and tell me that?
Mm.
No.
No, of course not. Yeah.
You conversation is a tremendous tool.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's all good.
Absolutely. I love that. And those are you just think the opposite of, even if you miss one of those, let's say you miss that training piece. And I love that you said when people are well trained, right early on, they realize, hey, I can do more. When they're not well trained, it's the opposite, right? Oh man, I can't even do this. So
Exactly.
I'm definitely not going to get to. So I think all five of those really work in conjunction. And it's amazing advice. What's your long-term vision here, though? What are you looking at a couple of years, 5 years down the road? What's your long-term vision here?
Okay. Our long-term vision for what our I work with people, everybody. I'm one of those. When you ask me what my niche is, any business that has people, that's my niche.
There you go.
Okay. Now, what we are looking at down the road is that this message that we want to get out there and have it fall on the ears of CEOs and large business owners that realize something needs to change.
Mhm,
I can go out and, with all due respect to CEOs, because they have a lot on their plate,
mhm,
right? So the possibility of my coming up to you and starting a conversation to try to influence your business isn't as good as if we put the message out there and they hear it and they come looking for a solution. So I believe there's going to be some major changes in corporate America.
mhm,
Part of it's being forced because of the result of the pandemic.
mhm.
But when people want to choose the solution, it has a tremendous impact on employees, how they look at their business, how they respect the management team. And if you can just imagine, if 85% of your team wanted to be there, that what you could do.
Yeah,
And
you're right. Yeah.
you may have heard the phrase, surround yourself with good people and let them do their job.
Of course.
That's a Ronald Reagan phrase.
Mhm, mhm.
There's another one. It is, in the abundance of counselors, there's victory. Do you know that some of the most valuable counselors we can have are our employees?
No
They know the job better than I do
absolutely.
because they do it every day. And they're more than happy to jump in and help. But to answer your question, I see significant changes coming in leadership styles in corporations and big business.
That's
Uh,
awesome. Yeah.
I can get into the small business side as well and talk a lot about why did this even start in the first place,
Mhm.
but that might be for another 20 minutes. Who
Well,
knows?
we gotta get you back on. That's you've given me incentive to get you back on anyway. Um, I I love all that, and you mentioned a lot about the differences between a manager and a leader, and I think leaders, true leaders, really recognize that their frontline people should know more than them, right? I always used to say that, hey, you better know this, but there's some things I know that you don't, but you better know this better than me. And I think managers will tend to, nope, I know everything. I'm the
Yeah, that's
I'm
a
the
that's a
expert.
bad spot to be in.
It really is. It
It's a
it really.
risky spot.
I have one more question for you, Steve. This has
Okay.
been
Mhm.
amazing. Um, how does because word spreads so much faster than myself entering the workforce back in the 80s and through the 90s, and you're probably of that same generation. Whereas that we were just, man, we want a job, and you stayed at one for a long time, which was great. Obviously you did a lot of different things, but now like word really spreads fast that, hey, don't go work for that company, or hey, that is a company to work for. How does social media now, in your opinion, play into, everything that you've been talking about today?
Well, because of the communication and the speed of social media, you can have the best of times and the worst of times.
Yeah.
The best of times comes when people are working for organizations that they enjoy being with. And this is one of the fruits that's going to come down the road. It'll take a little bit of experience to see it.
Mhm.
But I can tell you that any organization that has a reputation of treating people correctly will have people flocking to them because they want to be part of it.
Yeah.
And you also get the other side.
Yeah.
Now, social media can give both of these messages. Now, social media has a tendency to go heavy on the bad side. People like to talk about what's wrong as opposed to what's right.
Right. Yeah.
So, but we are also people with minds and intelligence, and we have the ability to sort through those things,
Hmm.
right? But when someone stands up and says that I work for UPS, and I have no problem saying this because I love the organization.
Hmm.
I worked for 30 UPS for 35 years, 34 in the management team.
Hmm.
I would recommend anybody go there
Yeah.
because they're a rock solid organization.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, can you imagine if other employees in other businesses would say the same thing,
Yeah.
right? And people will hear it and say, I want to work there.
Yeah. No doubt.
That's just the reality of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Spread the word.
Yeah, no doubt. I love it. I love it. Steve, this has been amazing. I was silent for a lot of the time because what you're saying is so compelling and so dead on today. And so I want to thank you first for taking the time, and I want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. I love your long-term vision here. And I do see, I think there's going to be a shift. I have to be optimistic. Because I think this has been a tough couple of years, but you really put in some great perspective on this 85% not changing in 32 years. That's just unacceptable for us to continue to survive and thrive in the type of economy that we would want to have. So thank you so much for sharing
Pleasure.
everything. And yes, I'm going to ask you to come back on, and we'll go into small businesses because that is just as
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, folks, we're going to leave it there. This has been the Leading from the Middle podcast with Kenny and with Steve, and we will talk to you real soon. Steve, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on.